So you watched Razor's basics guide, and now you're wondering how to build him for like mid to late game. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We are going to look at a mid to late game build for Razor, talk about a couple different teams, one of which I did not enjoy whatsoever, but it would be much more doable with better artifacts and in a better scenario. So real quick, we are going to recap the Razor that we are using, show off their artifacts and their stats real quick. Again, this is Cloud, my mod's Razor, not mine. Mine's C6, level 20. Nobody wants to see that. Razor is level 90 out of 90 with almost 18,000 HP, 1100 attack, 222 EM, split 53 over 188 with 184 energy recharge. For weapon, a level 90 R5 range slasher, artifacts 4-piece emblem, C3, and talents 10, 8, 11. Now, like I did say in the basics, emblem is more of a non-standard set to run on Razor. This will get up his electro damage from his burst, but not his physical damage. So that is kind of a weird, maybe this is kind of closer to like a hybrid build-ish. So we are going to go in and we're going to run in with the same team that we were finishing off the basics guide with, which is going to be Razor, Nahida, Xingqiu, and Layla. This is going to be a fridge bloom team, or a hyper fridge team, where we are going to be causing hyper blooms with on-field Razor. Razor does not do anything off-field. Getting most of his EM from Nahida's burst with her EM sharing. Then we're going to be using Layla's shield to allow Razor to cause superconduct. We are taking advantage of the fact that Dendro and Cryo have no reaction. So they can kind of coexist on the enemy at the same time without getting rid of either aura, meaning that we can cause superconduct reactions so that way they are going to take more damage from physical damage, which Razor still does, even though his burst also does electro, triggering the hyper blooms. So this is a very, very interesting team. I actually quite enjoyed this team. I would try to put a little bit more EM investment into Razor, but all in all, his hyper blooms aren't doing too bad damage. All of the very big Dendro damage numbers are coming from Nahida. This is a C6 Nahida, a C6 R1. So she is getting a ton of damage in here. Without the C6 Nahida, the amount of damage from this team would be significantly lower, meaning that we would probably need to invest a little bit more EM into Razor. Layla is on tenacity, meaning that she is giving Razor an attack buff through the 4-piece tenacity with her skill. So all in all, this team can be very, very good. It's a very, very interesting team. Like I said, I did enjoy it. Xingqiu's burst works really, really well with Razor's burst needing on-field normal attacks to activate both of them. Like I also said, we are still getting physical damage from Razor. We are getting the electro damage from Razor, triggering the hyper blooms, really using that superconduct to a very good degree, increasing the overall team damage through these different reactions. And as you can see, there's a ton of reactions going on while Razor is on the field, just kind of swinging his claymore around during his burst. I guess this would be considered a hyper fridge team, or like a quick fridge team, I guess. Okay, so we are now going to change out Razor's artifacts. We are going to go to a different set because Emblem really is a very interesting choice to do, right? I think typically if we're going to be running in a hyper bloom or even a hyper fridge or a quick fridge team, we would want something like 4-piece gilded. Now Cloud did not have a 4-piece gilded, so we are going to throw 4-piece Flowers of Paradise Lost onto Razor, so that way this is going to be much more of a pure hyper bloom, where we are going to have him dealing as much hyper bloom damage as possible, getting him a fair good amount of EM, as well as an okay split, not anything to write home about, but still okay. And this is going to be much more of a, we want him triggering as many hyper blooms as possible, so we're going to add extra hydro application to get all of those blooms there. So this team is going to be Razor, Nahida, Xingqiu, and Coco. Like I said, we want to make as many blooms as possible. In this team, though, we still do want to make sure that we have a fair good amount of ER on Razor, so that way he can still use his burst, because you're going to see behind me, as I'm talking about this stuff, if his burst is not ready to hyper bloom these blooms that are being created, the blooms start going off because we're making so many blooms. If his burst is not ready, they're wasted. Now, if everything works together with having enough ER, having his burst ready, being able to produce a ton of blooms that he can hyper bloom, It's actually a very good, very quick team at clearing this domain. But if something gets off, if his burst is not ready to go off of cooldown, it drastically slows it down so much. So that is something that we would have to do. We would have to really, really focus on getting ER in the substats and trying to roll for those ERs so that way we could have his burst as ready as possible. The first go through went really, really well. The second go through does not. And you can see that there's a massive, massive damage loss because his burst is not ready. And because Coco and Shincho are not necessarily either built for an on-field damage dealer, there's a major lacking. Of course, yes, I could, while I was trying to wait for him to get some energy, I could have gone to Nahida and used Nahida on field. That would have been a much better option than using Shincho or Coco on field. But it was almost like if he activated his burst right as the last enemy of the wave died and the new enemies came up, he wasn't doing anything after that. So then we'd have to take him off the field and waste the remainder of his burst. So I could see this being much, much better against a singular boss, like in the Abyss, versus wave after wave after wave of enemy. Because typically in those quick swap teams work, or teams where you have a ton of off-field application, works a lot better than having a singular on-field damage dealer that is going to be triggering your hyperblooms, right? Unless you have those characters that are the singular ones built well enough to be able to function in something like that. Now for the third team, we're going to talk about physical damage, right? Which is most likely going to be a 4-piece Pale Flame. Pale Flame is going to get up your physical damage as well as getting up your attack through using this skill. And then it's going to increase it even more and also increase the physical damage. So he can make use of this 4-piece Pale Flame, but Cloud did not have a 4-piece Pale Flame. So instead, I put him on a 2-piece Glad, 2-piece Pale Flame, just to kind of show the team that he would go into. Now, for weapon, I did swap him over to Serpent Spine to get some crit rate and crit damage onto him, because we don't care about EM in this. We care much more about attack and then our crit split. So for this team, we are going to try Razor, Zhongli, Raiden, and Rosario. We still want Superconduct. We still want Raiden to give a damage buff through her skill, and then Zhongli to also make the enemies weaker and to give a shield, because this team has no healer. Now, this team, I hated it. And I'm used to playing physical characters. Eula carried me for a very, very long time. I disliked this team so much. I can understand how it could work in principle. I understand how it could work in theory. I understand how somebody could make this team work super, super well. Maybe with like C6 Rosaria or C6 Mika or something like that. But I could not stand this team. Maybe even with like 4-piece Golden Troop Raiden, right? I did not like it. But I understand how it would work, right? C6 Rosario would be making the enemy weaker to physical, as well as passing on crit rate to our on-field character being Razor. Zhongli is going to make the enemy weaker, as well as providing a shield. Raiden is going to increase the burst damage through her skill, as well as help cause Superconduct with Rosaria's burst. All in all, I can 100% see how this team would work. I just did not like it. I would never run this team. I have ran a team kind of like this with Fremine before, and I enjoyed that much, much better than with Razor. And I couldn't do it. But this can be a very, very good option. I have seen this team ran, or a team similar to this ran. It's a very specialized niche team that you have to have everybody built in a very specific way for it to work. Now for the final team, we're going to talk about a kind of a pure Aggravate spread team. So we're getting rid of Hyperbloom, we're getting rid of Quick Bloom, we are just Aggravate spread with Razor, Nahida, Raiden, and Sucrose. Now this team was actually much more fun than the physical team. Sucrose sharing her EM, Nahida sharing her EM. And this one though, we are still going to be running a good crit split. We do want some EM, but we're going to be getting enough EM from Sucrose and Nahida that we can probably do an attack Sands, maybe run an EM Sands, depending on how much EM Nahida and Sucrose are going to share to us. But this is going to very much be a ton of damage with spread and Aggravate reactions, right? We've gotten rid of the Hydro, so we're not causing blooms. We are just doing spread and Aggravate using Sucrose to VV Shred, the Electro resistance down, so that way we are doing more damage. Having Raiden also, you could almost use Raiden as like either a golden troop, or you could also bring her every now and then on the field to then use her burst to then get energy back to Razor, still allowing Raiden to cause aggravate reactions. You could do something like that. I have used my Raiden to battery even like my Dia before, and a Dia Raiden Chevy overloaded team. So you can do a couple of different things. This team I did like much better than the physical team. This would be another one that, depending on the team, depending on the characters, it would depend on what set you would run. You could run like 4-piece Gilded, which would be really, really good, or you could even go back to like what Cloud had before and run Emblem. That could also be an okay one to get his energy readily available. Also, you could, if you do have a good enough crit split without needing something like Serpent Spine, you can slot back to Rain Slasher, meaning that you're going to be getting a lot of damage from the passive of Rain Slasher and, of course, the EM, which would, again, allow you to then run something like an Attack Sands, maybe, to get that up even higher, or an ER Sands for Emblem. This would be one of those teams where I could see Emblem being a very decent option, as well as something like Gilded. Now, that is going to be it for this video. If you have any questions, do be sure to leave it down in the comments. Myself or someone else should answer it, and I'll see you in the next one.